Hello all and welcome to this AWS tutorial. In our tutorial today, I will provide a brief overview on AWS App Runner. These are some reference URLs that I have leveraged to create this particular overview tutorial. These URLs can be extremely helpful to you, especially if you're working in a production environment, as they have additional information regarding the App Runner service. I will have these URLs posted in the description of this video. Let us now begin this particular tutorial with what is AWS App Runner. So AWS App Runner is a fully managed, fast, simple, and a cost-effective service that enables you to deploy source code or a container image directly to a scalable, load balanced, monitored, and secured web application. Right? So this is as simple as it gets. So if anybody asked you what is AWS App Runner, this is the definition that you want to give it to them. And it pretty much covers all the features of AWS App Runner. Now, we used a lot of words as part of our definition, right? We said it is fully managed. It is fully managed because it's a managed service. It is fast. And you will basically see once you start working with it, right? Something that is for you to explore. It is definitely simple. Again, you will see while we do, a hands-on lab or while you yourself configure the particular service. It is cost-effective, and we will basically deep dive into pricing towards the end of this tutorial. So just hang in there. We said it is scalable. Why is it scalable? Scalability is one of its features. It is scalable because it allows you to scale up or scale down easily. You can also configure the number of provision instances, and you can also configure the max load per instance. So it basically gives you complete scalability over your application, right? We said it is load balanced. Yes. As the load increases or decreases, it will use auto scaling to basically manage or balance the load. And internally also between the instances that are there, it automatically load balances the various requests that are received by the App Runner service. After that, we have monitored. So this is monitoring right here. Why are we saying it's a monitored service? We are saying it's monitored because it provides you a detailed build, deployment, and runtime logs. Also, it is integrated with CloudWatch. So if you have any specific cloud matrix or anything that you want to monitor, right, you can certainly do that as well. And after that, we said it is secured. Why did we say it is secured? We said it is secured because it basically provides you with a fully managed TLS setup, right? So you don't need to do anything on your end. And most importantly, it automatically renews the certificate before the expiration date. So hopefully this gives you a good idea as to what AWS App Runner is all about. So if you really go to see, is practically doing most of the heavy lifting. All that you have to tell this service is, hey, this is my source code. These are couple of my configuration settings. And it will actually have it deployed and up and running in pretty much no time, right? Okay, let us continue further. It also simplifies the process of deploying a new version of your code from GitHub or a new image from your repository. And right now, it only works with Amazon Elastic Container Registry or ECR. Now, of course, this could be the regular ECR or the ECR public. You can also automate deployments, right? Every time a commit is pushed to your code repository or a new version of your container image is pushed to your image repository. So if it detects a commit or a push to the repo, right, it will pull the latest and greatest and automate the deployment of your application. So you don't have to worry about that as well. Now, how can you work with App Runner? Now, App Runner is accessible via CLI, APIs, via console, and SDK. So you have all 4 arenas to work with this particular service, right? And this particular API is an asynchronous API create service. This helps you to create an App Runner service. And after the service is created, it also starts it. So it pretty much does everything for you. So I hope that this overview was helpful and you understood what App Runner is. So let us continue further ahead. Let us double click a little more on App Runner and see how it works. Right, so you have your App Runner service here. Now, of course, remember that you can have your source code or your container image, right? So your source code or your container image. So you basically pick or you add your source, whatever it is, either if it's a source code repo in GitHub or your container image in your ECR, right? And you select your deployment settings. After that, you provide some basic configuration, especially for your build settings, the type of the instance that you want to provision, the CPUs, the memories. If you need any auto scaling, any health check options, you can all have all of that configured over here. So you configure your build and service settings. After that, you review your settings. And finally, the service will be created and deployed for you. And once it is up and running, right, you'll receive a secure URL. And that is essentially a link to your application. Now, it could be production ready, it could be dev ready, it could be test ready, depending upon whatever environment that you are trying to deploy in using AWS App Runner. So remember, one of the things that we said over here is simple and fast. You can see that it's quite simple from this process itself, right? There's nothing complicated in this process. You either have your source code or your container image, you have your configuration settings, you review your settings, and basically you say create, and it'll go ahead and have that created, and your application will be up and running. Let us look at the benefits. I think the benefits are kind of self-explanatory, right? So we basically went through all the benefits. So it's, of course, it's easy, scalable, cost-effective. But if you really go to see everything that we have mentioned over here, right, in that little definition right up on the top, that is fully managed, fast, simple, cost-effective, scalable, load balanced, monitored, secured, all of these are benefits of this particular service, right? It's like a one-stop shop. You have everything going for you together. Use cases. Where can you use this service? You can, of course, use this particular service to deploy applications, APIs, services, right? And basically have them automatically deployed to AWS Cloud. So as long as you know where your source code is or you know where your container is, you can have it deployed to AWS Cloud in a very fast manner, fast and a simple manner, let me put it that way. And of course, it's cost effective. Talking about cost, that's a perfect segue for us to get into pricing. This is a URL that has pricing for this particular service. I actually have it open right here, right? So let us look at how AWS App Runner pricing works. What are you charged for? You are charged for the compute and the memory resources used by your application. If you want to automate deployments, then you will have to pay some additional monthly fee for that, right? And if you want to opt to deploy from source code, if you want to, you will pay the build fee or whatever amount it takes for the app runner to build a container from your source code. So either you give it a container or you provide the source code. Now, what happens and how the pricing works? Generally, I don't double click a lot into pricing, right? Because it's right here. But for App Runner, I'm going to double click a little bit more on how the pricing works. So So let's say you have your application, you kind of put all your configuration settings and you kind of went all the way through, right? Which is great. So now you've provisioned a container instance. So every provisioned container instance, right? Whether it is provisioned using a container image or whether it is provisioned using your source code. For every provisioned container instance, you will pay this much amount of money. That is $0.007 per GB hour, right? So per GB per hour. So this is just for provisioning. It doesn't matter whether the container is being used or not. You will be charged this much amount of money per GB per hour. If your container instance becomes active, that's where the price differs. So if the container instance is active, that's when you start paying this cost. Then it becomes $0.064 per CPU per hour. So that's your CPU cost, remember? And then you also pay 0.007 per GB per hour. Remember when we just saw right over here, you are charged for compute and memory resources. So once it gets active, this is your compute and this is your memory right there. And these are some supported configurations, right? So let's say if you had one CPU and 2 GB memory or 3 GB memory, you will be charged accordingly. So you'll have one CPU, right? So that's 0.0064. And if you have 2 GB of memory, then it will be twice this amount. Remember, this is per GB hour. In that case, it will become 0.014 because you have 2 GB memory. I'm going to scroll down a little over here. And again, if you want some add-ons, you can have automated deployments. It is going to charge you $1 per application per month, and the build fee is $0.005 per build minute. So if your build takes longer, you pay a larger build fee. Scrolling further down. So these are some quick pricing examples, right? So there are 3 examples over here. This is probably the simplest because it's only dev and test. And this is highly complicated because it's a high volume production environment. But the middle one over here is somewhere in between. It's not very complicated. It's a good example to start with if you want to start with. So what I'm going to do is we are going to walk through this particular pricing example, right? As I mentioned, I'm going to double click a little more on pricing for App Runner. So scroll down and you will see this particular example right here. So it's basically a lightweight commercial APIs of web services that are being hosted, right? It does not have a crazy volume request, it's decent. It does not undergo any peak hour activity or anything of that sort. So click on this plus image and that will basically tell us, right, what is the configuration that this particular application is using. So we are having a container instance that is being provisioned of size of 1 CPU and 2 GB memory, right? We have approximately 80 requests, when the container is active, which is decent, right? And then the number of instances that we have provisioned is 1. So that means you have 1 instance, the size of that instance is 1 CPU and 2 GB memory, and approximately 80 instances, so 80 requests, sorry. So that means you don't need auto scaling over here. What else do we know about this particular application? So the application is going to be, or this instance is going to be up and running for 24 hours. So that means you're going to pay the provision container instance cost for 24 hours. And those 80 requests that we get, right? Those 80 requests generally come during 8 hours every day, right? So 8 hours during the day, you get approximately 80 requests during which this container is going to be active. So remember, that is very important because the provision cost versus the active cost of this container instance are different. So now let us look at how they computed the cost for this. So we'll start with this first. This is easier. So this is daily provision container instance fee. Remember, it is 0.007 GB per hour. We just saw it up on the top. Our instance has 1 CPU and 2 GB, right? So I have an Excel spreadsheet here. This is the cost. So we have 1 CPU and 2 GB, and this particular instance is going to be up for 24 hours. So it is 0.007. We have 2 GB, that means into 2, right? And this instance is going to be up and running for 24 hours. So that means we have to multiply it by 24. So I hope that this is clearly understood. This is the cost of 1 GB per hour. Our instance has 2 GB, so we have to multiply it by 2. And the instance is going to be up for 24 hours. Hence, we have to multiply it by 24. So this is our provisioned container instance cost per day, 0.336. So that's how they came to 0.34. They rounded up this 0.336 to 0.34. So this is just the provisioned container instance cost. Now, remember that this instance is going to be active for 8 hours during the day. So that cost is going to be different. So how are we going to compute that cost? Remember, when the instance is active, we have to pay cost for the CPU, and we also have to pay the cost for the memory. So CPU cost is 0.064 and memory is 0.007. So again, if you come here, right, so 0.064, and it is going to be running for 8 hours, and we have 1 CPU. So into 1, right? And then if I come back over here, remember the instance is going to be up for 8 hours. So we have to multiply it by 8. This is the cost for 1 CPU. We have only 1 CPU. So I'm just to showcase, I'm multiplying it by 1, right? And it is going to be up for 8 hours. So this is the total cost for 8 hours. That's the cost, right? 0.152. And we also have to pay for the memory. And we have 2 GB memory. So this is the cost for 1 GB memory, right? 2 GB per hour. So that means into 2. Remember that this particular instance is going to be up and running for 8 hours. So you have to multiply it by 8. So this is what we will have, right? This is the cost for 1 GB multiplied by 2, because you have 2 GB instance, and multiplied by 8. So this is the final cost. So this is the cost for 8 hours when the instance is active. Now, so this is the first part of this computation right here. After that, you will see that they subtracted 8 hours of provision container instance. Why? Because here they have taken 24 hours. So in 24 hours, 8 hours, the instance is going to be active. That means the container is going to remain in a provision state for 16 hours. So there are 2 ways to look at this. Either you reduce this 24 hours to 16 hours because 8 hours are active, or you basically subtract the cost of 8 hours of provision container instance. Whatever is easier for you, right? So for us to make this very simple, since this instance is going to be active for 8 hours, and we know that, I can basically reduce that 8 hours from here. So that is going to be 24 minus 8, which is essentially 16. I'm going to make it 16 hours, right? So 16 hours of provision instance cost or fee. So that is this particular number, right? So I basically just reduced it right from the daily instance cost. What they have done is they reduced it from the active instance cost, the provision instance cost from the active instance cost. Either ways is fine. At the end of the day, what we need to have is the total number of hours when the instance will be in a provision state and the total number of hours when the instance will be in an active state. And both of them should add up to 24 hours because that's the number of hours you have in a day. So now if you want to see what is the total cost, this is the total cost, right? So this is our total cost per day. Per day. This is the total cost per day. And that's how they came to 0.85. They rounded this up to 0.85. And if you want to know your total monthly cost, let's say how much you want to pay per month, that will be basically this into 30, which is $25.44. And that is how they came to 25.50. Now, the reason why they have 25.50 and I am low by 0.06 cents is because they rounded this up, right? So if I round it up to 0.85 and multiply it by 30, then the total cost will be 25.5. And that's how they came to 25.50. So essentially, your monthly cost is going to be approximately $25 to have this application up and running on a single container instance with 1 CPU and 2 GB memory. So hopefully this pricing was clear. It can get a little confusing, but remember, at the end of the day, you want to ensure that you have the total number of hours that you think, right, that the instance is going to remain in a provision state, and the total number of hours when you think that the instance is going to remain in an active state. As long as both of them add up to 24, you will be good. And if there are any add-ons for deployment or build fee or anything of that sort, just add those fees on top of the cost that you have. So this is it from me today, guys. I hope that this overview session was helpful. I will try to create a hands-on lab around it, and I will see you shortly in some other video. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.